Shake the hand that feeds you. Michael Pollan. In traditional mass production, there was little collaboration between assemblers and their suppliers. Once a part was needed, the company collected bids, then negotiated with the suppliers it chose. The most important aspect of the relationship with suppliers was lowering the cost. Therefore, the larger the supplier and the more they used economies of scale, the better their bargaining power. Contracts were short, up to 1 year, and the pressure on cost reduction created fierce competition between suppliers. Manufacturers made this competition worse. After their chosen suppliers had completed the lengthy process of creating production-ready designs, they sent the final ones to new suppliers to try and get lower prices. As a result, suppliers kept their manufacturing processes as discreet as possible, sharing as little information as possible with car producers, and avoiding collaborations with other suppliers. Different suppliers were needed to produce all the individual components of a car, which meant that at the end of the process, parts could arrive from various companies and not fit together. Ready parts also required error fixing and debugging. Instead of dealing with many suppliers for all the components required, Toyota created a tier system. It would deal with first-tier suppliers who produced the full parts, for example, wheels, and the first-tier suppliers, in turn, used second-tier suppliers to produce smaller components, for example, screws. Full collaboration between first-tier and second-tier suppliers meant that all components matched the parts' designs. This also reduced the number of suppliers Toyota had to deal with to about 1/5 of the traditional mass production system, so less workforce was needed to deal with suppliers. Suppliers were chosen based on past relationships, not bids, and contracts were long-term. Failure to deliver meant reduction of business until the supplier mended its problems. Contracts were drawn based on the target market price of the finished car and deciding how to ensure enough profit to both the manufacturer and the suppliers. Toyota held shares in its suppliers' companies and also served them as a bank, giving them loans so they could purchase materials to produce parts. There were no exclusivity clauses in the contracts, and suppliers were encouraged to also produce parts for other companies at a higher profit. During the manufacturing process, manufacturers and suppliers collaborated on reducing wastes and inefficiencies to bring down costs. Toyota would send its managers to assist with the suppliers' improvement efforts and also sent workers when the suppliers had an overload of work. Improvements were openly discussed, and the focus was on quality, not on price. Continuous improvement meant lower running costs and enabled cutting prices during market slumps. Suppliers were grouped into supplier associations, where improvements and market opportunities were shared. Parts were delivered to the assembly line, just when Toyota needed them, with transportation carts going back and forth, to avoid piling inventories at both the supplier and producer plants. Let's recap traditional mass production versus lean. Instead of little collaboration between the assemblers and their suppliers, full collaboration that includes holding shares, banking, and sending workers to suppliers. Instead of dealing with many suppliers for all the parts, for example, suppliers for the wheel parts, dealing with a few suppliers for one tier of parts, for example, suppliers for whole wheels. Instead of choosing suppliers based on collecting bids, then negotiating, choosing suppliers based on past relationships. Instead of focusing on lowering the cost, focusing on quality and sharing the profits. Instead of short contracts, long-term contracts and relationship building. Instead of fierce competition between suppliers, suppliers have associations where improvements are discussed to increase quality. Instead of not knowing how the supplier's manufacturing processes work because it is kept discreet, sending managers to assist with the suppliers with improvement efforts. This concludes the information on Toyota's culture. In the next 2 chapters, we will look at its operational excellence.